Go for it. Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk with you, Alex. Yeah, so I've been an entrepreneur all my life. I've never had a real job, and I always love to learn by doing. And so I've started a number of companies just to learn different crafts. And Help Scout has really been the most successful of those. We founded the company just over 7 years ago, and it's been a really fun journey so far. I'm currently based in Colorado. I work remotely, just like most of our team. We have people in more than 60 cities worldwide today. And yeah, we make a product for companies to do great customer service. So we have all sorts of tools to do email, chat, create your own help center on your website, any of those sorts of tools that help your customers use your product and become raving fans. We'll make something to help you do that. So that's what our company does. Yeah, it was very intentional. So the company that I was part of before this was one that I started. It was just an agency that I started with the same guys that I co-founded Help Scout with. So I've been working with those guys for almost 14 years. And by way of doing that work, the goal was always to make a software product, to make a SaaS product that we could support. But we wanted to get better at our craft. We wanted to learn how to build things for the web and design things that were good products. And so we were doing client work for several years. And by way of doing that, we also worked on a couple of side projects. And so the side projects were little dabbles in SaaS software. And we would have small ideas that we would bring to life over the course of a weekend or something. And so through supporting those products, I adopted a number of different kind of help desk solutions or just shared email inboxes. And I was thinking about the customer support space for more than 2 years before we really acted on it and created Help Scout. It's not like we invented a new market. Customer service is always and will always be important to businesses. And so as a business, frankly, we just had a lot of the same challenges that our customers have. And so it was a really great opportunity for us to understand the challenges they were facing and kind of solve a problem for ourselves and see how it felt, and then try to solve it for a bunch of other people. So it was a very intentional choice to get involved in customer service. It's been something I've always been passionate about. I know I'm never going to run out of energy talking about solving that sort of problem. And again, it's not one that's trendy. It's not going to go away. So for all those reasons, we've decided to play the long game with Help Scout. Yeah, culture and values may be somewhat top down to start. You have to be very intentional about those things. But very quickly, I'd say once our team was more than 10 people, the culture was actually being crafted by the people in it, much more so than myself. So today we have almost 90 people on the team, and they are much more responsible for who our company is and what values we represent in the market and to our customers than I am, which is a really amazing thing because I think they've been able to craft something much better than what I would have been able to do on my own. It was. So we founded the company in Boston, Massachusetts, and there's a wonderful technology community there. But prior to founding Help Scout, I had worked remotely for several years with my two co-founders, and so we were very familiar with working that way. We were also deeply inspired by companies like 37 Signals, now Basecamp, that literally wrote the book on remote work, right? So there were a lot of companies that we were inspired by that were doing remote work and they were doing so successfully. And so when it came time to hire the first people on our team, we looked at the Boston market and how competitive it was. And very early, I just determined, look, we can optimize for one of two things in our company. We can optimize for geography, or we can optimize for talent. And for me, I felt like giving the company the best chance to succeed meant optimizing for the talent and creating a culture within which those people can do their best work and solving some of the trade-offs that may be involved with doing remote work or co-located work, neither of which is perfect. But we decided really early on, just frankly by way of being scrappy and not having to compete on the same level that every other company in Boston was competing, we just decided, let's do this thing remotely. Let's hire people remotely from day one and see how it goes. Well, I don't think it's for someone that's just maybe fresh out of school or learning a craft for the first time. It's really challenging to work in a remote environment and be uh, junior, so to say, or just kind of early in your career, because you do have to spend blocks of time doing focused and very productive work. While you do have supportive people on the team, you're still doing a lot of things on your own. And so we found, at least in our experience, that it's best to hire people that have been doing this for a while. And what remote offers those people is just a quality of work-life harmony that's not possible in a co-located environment. So you want to work 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. As long as it works with your teammates, you can do that. It's very flexible. You can kind of come and go as creative inspiration strikes. You can work your focus blocks of time whenever you feel most productive. And so, for a lot of those reasons, it works really well for somebody that's already relatively mature in their craft. But again, I'm not sure it's the best fit for somebody that's setting out to learn something at a very high velocity and kind of partner with their teammates to get where they want to go career-wise. I would suggest that people get where they want to go career-wise and learn the craft that they are passionate about, and then look for that remote opportunity. Well, no doubt it requires a lot of discipline, right? You want to be really productive. You want to give the company that you're working for your best for 40 hours. And that absolutely requires discipline, just both personally and professionally. And so that's kind of what I mean. And being passionate about a craft, you have no real problem or qualms putting in your best 40 hours every week towards that kind of work. But there's tons of different challenges. I think that you have to be an excellent written communicator. A lot of what happens in a remote culture happens asynchronously without face-to-face communication like we're having right now. And so you have to learn to be a really excellent written communicator and just proactive communicator. That's something you have to do really well in a remote environment. Another thing is that I say this all the time, but remote people have to be active participants in the culture. In a co-located culture, you can actually just kind of hang out, have fun, take in all of the benefits the culture has to offer. But in remote, if you just kind of take in without being a participant, it gets lonely really fast. It's possible to feel imposter syndrome, to feel loneliness, and to feel like you're not really contributing to the big company goals if you're not actively participating in the culture. And so that's something that we talk a lot about and that we look for in a lot of the people that we work with, just to make sure that they're maintaining the right balance and that they're always kind of being additive to the team that they're working on. Because that's something that people run into for sure. Yeah, all over the place. So we have a few folks in the UK where you are. We have probably about 60% of our team is based in the US, but another 40% is based from all over. So we have several people in Australia, several people all throughout Europe, and we have even a few people that just kind of travel the world, and I have no clue where they are right now. Sure. Yeah, I think it's really awesome actually because we have built in to our culture, unlike a company that may be based in a place like Boston or London, we have built-in diversity of not just the color of people's skin, but actually their backgrounds and the perspectives that they have, and just the culture that they've grown up in or that they've been a part of. And I really love that about our team, that we've been able to just build this amazing kind of diversity of thought throughout the culture, and that's become part of the culture. And I think that's much more possible, or it's a little bit easier to do in a remote company, and that's really fantastic. But there's lots of tactical things you can do to really evangelize your values as a company and what you want the culture to be about. One of the most important things we do is gather everybody together twice a year. Sometimes you just can't beat face-to-face communication and building relationships in that way. And so we have two retreats that are all hands every year, and we do them all over the world. A lot of fun, and it's a really great way for people to connect on that level that we don't get to connect on very often, which is in person. So that's one of the tactics, but we have a bunch of other things that we do to try to manifest our values and culture throughout the org. I think it takes a while to, when you're optimizing for talent and great people, there's a group of people that work remotely that are absolutely beyond incredible at their craft. They're super talented and they're excellent at the work. And this group of people is very selective about the companies that they work for. They want to make sure that the remote company embodies their values and who they are, and they've got a lot to share there. So establishing ourselves as one of those companies takes a lot of time. Trying to promote Help Scout as a remote, not only remote friendly, but remote first brand, and giving people the trust and confidence that we do remote the right way and in a way that sort of aligns with the way that they want to work and that they're in their own personal values. That took quite a bit of time. I mean, these days we have hundreds of people apply for every role, but it wasn't always like that. And starting out, making those first kind of 6 or 7 remote hires is arguably a little bit more challenging than hiring in a city, right, where you can get to know people one-on-one. So it's really establishing those kind of first 6 to 10 hires and building a base which people can look at and actually build confidence in, that you're kind of committed to remote work, you're doing it the right way, you're thinking about the right things. Because once we established ourselves as sort of a remote brand, all of those really talented people that are looking for their next thing, we want to be on the short list. And I think that for a lot of people, we've gotten onto the short list, and that's been really productive. So it certainly pays dividends, but it takes a lot of time. Thank you. Yeah, so it's pretty consistent across the board. Each role has very specific things that they do slightly differently, but from a high level, um, we spend the first month proactively recruiting. So one big challenge, and remote teams face it just like co-located teams do. One big challenge that may not be a surprise is that everybody applies for roles at Help Scout when we open them up. They're usually white males. And so in order to diversify our candidate pool so that we feel like we're hiring from a very broad and diverse group of people, we spend a month proactively recruiting people that we know to be qualified for the role and that are women and people of color mostly. And so by doing that, we're really able to even out the hiring pool so that we feel like we have a good chance to diversify our team. Again, we feel like that's a really critical thing in terms of our success as a company. And so we always spend the first month trying to proactively recruit. So if you go to our website today, there's probably a couple of roles that we're hiring for that are not visible on the website yet because we're proactively recruiting to diversify the pool. So that's the first part of it. Second part is just going through kind of the interview process. So we have a couple of initial sort of culture screens where we're trying to not only screen the person for culture fit, but also their technical skill. Whatever it is that we're hiring for, we're screening their technical skills and abilities just in a one-on-one interview. And then we actually have one more in-person interview that's more of a people ops interview. So we get a sense for what their compensation expectations are, just a lot of logistics, what their timeline is, if we have to move really fast in order to hire them, or if they're not really in a rush. There's a lot of logistics that you want to get right up front so that you can be respectful of whatever considerations are on their mind. And then you get into a project. So all of this happens remotely, by the way. We don't meet anybody one-on-one in person until they're hired. So we give people a project, and this is something that we added to the mix. We were really bad at hiring for the first few years of the business. Once we added a project to the mix, it really helped on a number of levels. That was the most helpful thing we could have done for our hiring process. And so the project takes anywhere from 3 to 6 hours. We try to be really respectful of your time, but we need to get a good sense of what your skills are like. And so typically 3 to 6 hours for a project to be done. Then we evaluate that, go back and forth a little bit. And then there's typically sort of a final interview and references at the end. So average time to hire for us is about 40 days. It takes a little bit longer than it would for an in-person hire, and we found, at least in our experience, that remote people prefer to go on a longer journey to get to know the company, get to know people in that company, and so typically 40 days feels good for both sides. At least that's our experience. And so while that might go a little bit faster, if it's like a place like Boston, I found that people would get hired in a few days. We're very dedicated to the process and loyal to the process, just to make sure that we don't make any mistakes. So that's kind of the way we do it. Yeah. Uh, just be be excellent and be passionate about the work. In the end, for us, it's all about the work that you do and the passion and acumen for learning and improving in that craft that we're looking for. And so, do work you're really proud of, whether that's as a solopreneur, doing your own thing, or writing a blog, or doing open source work, or it's working in a big company. It really doesn't matter to us. It's just showing passion and a level of a desire to improve in your craft, and kind of a track record of excellence along the path that you've been so far. That's what we're looking for. That's what it means to be qualified for a role here. Because again, like I said, we try not to hire people that are super early in their career. We want you to sort of have decided that this is what you want to do for your career. You want to be really excellent at it, and you're looking for a place where you can do your best work and contribute at a high level. It's that point at which we want to hire you at Help Scout. Yeah, that doesn't include the onboarding. So that's just from very first conversation to signed offer letter. And so the onboarding process is separate. And once you join the company, we do ask you to come to Boston or one of our offices. Maybe it's Colorado here. But we ask you to come somewhere where you can actually get to know several of your teammates. So we do spend a week with you in person, doing all sorts of onboarding and just kind of introducing you to the company. But most importantly, trying to help you build relationships with the people that you'll be working with on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes we'll fly those people in just to make sure you've sort of got that baseline relationship where you can go back home and you feel like you're working with friends. You feel like you're working with people that you know and that you're comfortable with and you can be honest with. So that's always the first week. Only the project to do a test. So we try to be really careful. I think there's one case. So if we're hiring for an operations and architecture, like a site reliability engineer, the kinds of engineers that are working with infrastructure every day, that's a really challenge. You can't test somebody's skill set in 3 to 6 hours on that one. So we actually have people take a test on that one for the project. But that's the only role in all of Help Scout that doesn't involve some sort of interactive projects and working alongside the team to craft something or create something. And so we really try to not to do any sort of tests, because in the end, you're not going to be taking any tests once you work here. That's not how it works. We're not going to ask you to do hard math problems or anything like that. We want you to see how you would do the work exactly in exactly the same environment. So you're doing the project remotely on your own, and then you're delivering something with some commentary and written communication about that. That's exactly the kind of work you'd be doing every day. We put them in the support queue. They have to become a product expert to some level. That's really important to us. So most people will spend at least a week in the support queue just learning to use the product and learning to talk with our customers and be able to empathize with some of the challenges that they're facing. So no matter what role it is, we put you in the support queue. And then otherwise, we're just teaching you about our business. We're very transparent. I think that's one of the cornerstones of remote work. You have to be very transparent with information so that everybody feels like they're part of it and a participant, like I said. So we share all sorts of business numbers and metrics and so on and so forth with them so that they feel like they have a great understanding of the business and how they can make an impact. Fairly flat. It would be a little bit too idealistic. Every entrepreneur likes to start off with this really idealistic view of the world where they have a completely flat org structure and then that always collapses eventually. So it's not possible to have a complete, at least in my experience, to have a completely flat organization that's also working really efficiently. So we do have some levels, but there's never more than one or two. So we have a concept of players and coaches at Help Scout. So a player is what would be thought of as an individual contributor, somebody that's doing the work with all of their time, and coaches would be full-time managers. And so we there's a lot of reasons we use that terminology, but one distinction we want to make is that player coach is a really hard role because you're constantly doing context switching. So we try not to put anybody in a role where they're a they're a manager, but they're also contributing as an individual contributor. That's really challenging, and especially in remote, being a coach, being a manager is a bit more challenging, in my opinion. Whereas being a player is a little bit more liberating and awesome when you're working remotely. So we try to be really considerate of that, especially of coaches, and make sure that by way of forcing people into one of those two tracks, and you can always switch, but by having full-time coaches, that means we actually have less coaches. We don't have many people at Help Scout that have one or two direct reports. It's like 8, right? Because they're full-time working with those people. And so, even on a team of about 90 people, we only have about 12 coaches. And so that's a very minimal amount of hierarchy involved. That's one way that we try to stay away from it, and also make sure that the group of coaches are very aligned in terms of values and the ways in which they go about managing the happiness of their team. Yeah, absolutely. But in the end, another reason we like that analogy is that if just to borrow a sports reference for a moment, there's a reason why people wear jerseys of players, right? Nobody wears a jersey of the coach, right? We don't want coaches to necessarily get the credit. We want to be a players first culture where the people that shine and the people that get the credit are the people that are doing the work. Our job as coaches is to just facilitate that work and to do our best to glorify the people that are doing awesome stuff. And so that's another reason we use that terminology. Yeah, you definitely have somebody you can lean on, and hopefully that's a really open and honest relationship where that's somebody that's also able to push you and keep you accountable and allow you to enable you to continue to progress in your career. It's really important. Even if it means progressing outside of Help Scout, our job is to try and help you progress and reach whatever professional goals that you have for yourself. So they're absolutely meant to be play a supportive role and one that optimizes for that person before the business. We always want to optimize for the person and their success before the business. And then we hope they also get support from their fellow colleagues and other players on the team as well. Let's see. We think of them as product, which is actually very small. It's only a couple of folks. Engineering is almost about 40 people. That's our largest team. Then we have people ops. That's 4 people. And then we have customer support, which I think is about 15 people. Then we have sales. That's currently 6 people. And then we have marketing, which is around 10 people. Um, and I think that might be it. We have finance, which is 2 people. So those are all the teams that I can remember. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody. Yeah. Uh, there's definitely tools that we use. I try not to get too into the tools or specific about those things only because the tools aren't what make remote work work. It's really about just taking an approach where you're really transparent. So being transparent early on in remote culture is easy, but then being transparent long term as the team grows is actually you have to be very intentional. It's much more challenging and it's a lot more work. So just find ways to be kind of transparent with information. Be mostly asynchronous. There was a point at which in our company I felt like we were too asynchronous, where things actually moved more slowly. People weren't having FaceTime when they needed to. And so I'd say about 80% of the time, 4 out of 5 times, asynchronous communication is probably the optimal way of communicating, but at least 1 out of every 5. And for a coach, probably 4 out of every 5 times you should be face to face, having chats or catch ups with in person with people and synergizing in the same way that you would if you were sitting in the same office. And so just kind of getting those things dialed in terms of what channel to use and when. We have written communication guidelines as to when to use Slack, when to use email, when to just jump on a Zoom call. We have all those sort of things documented just so that we can establish the right protocols, as you call them, for our team. To me, it's just communicating really honestly and openly with them and being vulnerable. Leaders aren't typically very vulnerable. And so, whenever we're facing a challenge, just be honest about it. Whenever we're having a great month, be honest about it. I hope that people on the team see me as a really transparent communicator or one that doesn't really BS. It's not possible for me to hide my feelings. I'm just going to be vulnerable and we'll see what happens. And so hopefully people just see me as someone that not only is inspiring them with the vision of the company and all the things we want to accomplish and the way that we want to go about our business and the kind of people that we want to work with, but also just in terms of my day-to-day communication and the ability and hopefully they feel like I'm open, that they can ask me any sort of questions. And that's the only way I really see that I can impact the culture today is just to try and live it as best I can. Mhm. I think so, but that's one of the really interesting things about having a diverse team with a bunch of different points of view and backgrounds and perspectives because, some people they came of age in a culture or a work environment that wasn't transparent. I've run into cases where they even believe it's inappropriate to be transparent about your career goals and things that you want to accomplish outside of Help Scout and things like that. And so we try to be mindful of those and just have an open dialogue. So I wouldn't say that the culture, I hope the culture is not a reflection of who I am and what I bring to the business and the experiences that I've had. Hopefully it's a reflection of everyone's collective backgrounds and experiences and cultural sensitivities. That's something that you kind of deal with firsthand on a remote team. I hope that we see the only way to change the perception around remote work is to build good remote first companies. Being remote friendly is actually quite hard. It's quite a bit harder. You see a lot of people that have had a bad experience with remote work. Typically, it's in an environment where remote was actually made to be an exception to the rule. Most people work in an office and then they sort of let a few people work remotely, or they say, you can work a few days from home, whatever. Those are very dysfunctional remote environments, and a lot of people will get scared off by way of having an experience like that. And so I think in order to move remote work forward as a way of doing things, there just need to be more remote first companies that kind of say, this is the way that we're going to design our workplace, and it's going to be remote from day one. It's going to be part of our DNA. And more of those kinds of companies in the world will slowly change the perception that exists today. Yeah, the most important thing I would say is just to set up the culture that you always dreamed of being part of. Try to build a culture in which people can do their best work. They have a lot of freedom and autonomy where that's possible, because a lot of people are capable of X, right? But the culture only allows them to achieve Y. And my goal is to create a culture in which people can actually reach and even exceed their potential. But that's really hard. So just try to design a work environment that's not necessarily optimized for you, but it's optimized for everybody else to do their best work. That's what energizes me when I wake up every day, is getting to work alongside people that I really look up to, that are really excellent at their job, and feel like they can do a good job here. So uh, that really is kind of the first principle of trying to build at least the Help Scout culture, is just make it a place where people really enjoy coming to work every day and they feel like they can do their best. Well, you're looking at it. It's pretty pretty basic. I've got a chair back there. I've got my dog sleeping right there. And I've got a big plant over here to the right. My wife does plants. But yeah, I just try to keep it. And I have an office that I go into as well. So we do have two offices. One's in Boston and one's in Boulder, Colorado here. Anytime you've got at least 5 or 6 people in a given area, we let people get an office. So maybe later I'll ride my bike into the office. It's quite flexible, really. But I just try to have a really clean kind of setup where I can just, wherever I take my laptop is where I can work. And one of the reasons I moved here is so I could get away from a slight concentration. We have maybe 10 people in Boston, and once I moved away, I was able to really truly dog food the culture on a different level, and so that was helpful. But yeah, there's nothing really specific about my environment that's special. Just a standing desk and a chair. That's all I need. Yeah, the easiest possible way is just to have a separate space. So for me, this is the this is the only room I will do work in the house. I don't do work on the couch. I don't do work in front of the television. Unless I can give 110% of myself to the work, I just don't bother. And I think a lot of them, my headspace may always sort of be in work mode a little bit, and I think that's a great thing. But when you're actually doing the work, it should be very intentional, very focused, and it should be in a space that's really reserved for that sort of thing and nothing else if possible. So, in Boston, I had a tiny little apartment, so I actually preferred to go to the office. I prefer to just have a separate space always where I can go in, and that is work time. That is workspace. Nothing but work gets done there. And that's always helped me to compartmentalize work and personal life. And when I get to bike or walk to work, that's really a really good buffer that allows me to be a husband and to kind of disconnect a little bit, because I think that's required to do your best 40 hours of work every week. You got to be able to disconnect for a lot of the other time, and so I've really seen the value in that, and especially constraining yourself to a certain number of hours working every week will actually allow you to be more productive. If you're always working, you're always going to feel like you've got more time that you can put into accomplishing whatever it is. So try to be a little bit disciplined about the hours you're putting in as well. It doesn't mean you're mailing it in. It doesn't mean you're not doing enough if you put in 40 or 50 hours a week. Let's see. I guess my favorite place to work remotely is the beach in Costa Rica. I go there a couple times a year, just because I've picked up surfing in the last couple of years, and so I like to go surfing in the morning and then work for the afternoon. That's always fun. That's the best place. The worst place is just any place with bad internet, I can tell you. Yeah, the key is if you're ever like staying at an Airbnb or anywhere you have to work, you have to make the person show you, go to the speed test website and show you the speeds. And until they do that, just don't book it. That's right. Make them take a screenshot. You got to know. Yeah, if you're looking for a remote role, one thing is to make sure that you have a craft that you're deeply passionate about and that you think you're really good at, that you've become really good at. That's important. But the second most important thing is to identify some companies that share your personal values that you really resonate with, and then go hard. Don't bug them, but really seek out those companies and find ways of appealing to those companies. I meet a lot of people that we'll send out, a dozen applications a day, and I'm just telling you, we can tell when you're sending out a dozen applications a day as opposed to really putting some thought and time into your HelpScout application or your Zapier application or your Buffer application. So Seek out those companies that really resonate with you personally, maybe two or three at a time, and really focus on what it would take to obtain a role there. And I think that kind of dedication, that kind of passion for kind of the company, it's easy for us to see. It's easy for us to really resonate with that sort of approach. And so just make sure that you don't spread yourself too thin in terms of finding a job. That doesn't mean spray and pray. So just focus on a couple of companies that you'd really like to work for. If those don't work out, that's fine. Find a few other companies that you feel like you would really be able to do your best work for. Thanks, Alex. Likewise. Thank you, man.